It all started on a sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind that makes you forget how cruel family can be. My name is Ethan Miller, 28, clean-shaven, calm by nature but stubborn in ways my father never understood. That day, I made one mistake, or at least that's what my father called it. I had refused to participate in a dinner argument, standing my ground quietly while my father berated my younger cousin. "Ethan, do you think you're smarter than everyone here?" he shouted, red-faced and trembling with rage. "Stay outside until you learn respect." It wasn't the first time he had tried to humiliate me in front of family, but this time I didn't retreat. I didn't beg. I walked out calmly, keeping my pride intact. Outside, the air smelled of freshly cut grass. I leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed, and watched through the window as the dinner continued without me. My father's face was twisted in frustration, my mother silently attempting to mediate, but failing entirely. Minutes passed. I was about to give up and leave when a sleek black limousine pulled up at the driveway. I squinted. The driver stepped out, opening the door with precision. Out came my grandmother, Margaret, elegant, composed, her sharp eyes scanning the scene like a hawk. She was a woman who commanded respect without raising her voice, a woman whose presence could change the course of any argument. "Ethan," she said softly, but the strength in her voice made everyone inside freeze. "Shall we go?" My father's face went pale. The red in his cheeks drained like paint being washed away. He knew. He always knew. When Margaret got involved, there was no arguing, no bluffing, only results. I didn't speak. I simply followed her to the limo. The engine purred like a predator, and as we pulled away, I glanced back at the house. Inside, my father was muttering under his breath, furious yet powerless. My mother's eyes were wide, unsure how to react. Cousins and aunts exchanged glances, realizing for the first time that I had an ally they couldn't intimidate. The ride was quiet, but not empty. My grandmother finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Your father doesn't understand strength," she said. "He thinks control comes from fear. It doesn't. You will learn respect through preparation, patience, and knowing your own power." I nodded. "He won't change." "He won't," she agreed. "But he will learn. And when he does, you will be ready." The limo rolled past the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past the houses where I had once felt trapped and dismissed. Every block reminded me of the silent injustices, the humiliations, the long nights of being ignored, underestimated, erased. This ride wasn't just about escape. It was the start of something bigger, because 5 years of patience had taught me one truth. Revenge doesn't need yelling. Revenge doesn't need chaos. It only needs timing, strategy, and the calm resolve to show up when everyone thinks you've been defeated. And that day, I began to take control. By the time the limo parked at a small, secluded estate owned by my grandmother, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Not loud, not destructive, but undeniable. "Inside," she said. "It's time to learn how to make them see what they've ignored all these years." I stepped out, the weight of the past settling behind me, ready to plan a revenge that would be quiet, precise, and devastating. The first lesson in this new life was clear. Never underestimate a child your family tries to suppress. And with that, my journey had begun. The estate my grandmother owned was quiet, expansive, and intentionally secluded. Every corner of the property seemed designed for reflection and for plotting strategies no one outside the family could anticipate. I followed her through a hallway lined with portraits of our ancestors. Their eyes seemed to watch us, silent witnesses to decades of family politics. Margaret didn't look at them. She looked at me, directly, with a sharpness that made my skin prickle. "You see that?" she said, gesturing to the portraits. "They believed legacy could grant them control. But power doesn't live in titles or money or fear. It lives in awareness and timing." I nodded. Her words sank deep. For years, my father had relied on his reputation, his anger, his sheer ability to intimidate anyone who opposed him. That strategy had worked for decades until now. Margaret poured tea, her movements graceful, precise. She didn't speak for a while, letting me absorb the silence. Then, in that quiet, she gave me the first instruction. Observe, gather, wait. Timing is everything. They will reveal weaknesses, they always do. And when they do, you will be ready. I understood immediately. This wasn't about a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't about shouting or exposing them to everyone at once. It was about quiet domination. The kind that leaves them powerless while you remain untouchable. For the next few weeks, I followed her plan meticulously. I learned things about the family I had never known. Patterns, habits, insecurities. My father still believed I had been broken by their cold dismissal, and my mother still assumed I had been humbled. Both were wrong. I started with subtle moves, removing minor privileges, quietly redirecting household resources, ensuring my younger cousins began to see me differently. Nothing confrontational, nothing visible, but every gesture reinforced one truth. I was no longer a child they could control. Meanwhile, Rachel, my younger cousin, kept attempting to assert herself as the golden child. She didn't realize that the very tools she once used to manipulate everyone were now being turned against her. One evening, my grandmother and I sat in the study, reviewing the family tree, the assets, the ongoing social alliances. She looked at me and said, "They underestimate patience. They underestimate intelligence. They always assume rage or forgiveness, but they forget about preparation. That's your advantage." By the time my father noticed the subtle shifts, cousins hesitating to report to him, family, friends questioning his decisions, it was already too late. I didn't need to confront him. His authority had begun to crumble quietly, invisibly. One night, as I walked past the main house toward the guest wing, my father stepped onto the porch. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Ethan," he began, but I stopped him with a calm, unwavering stare. "No," I said, "not tonight." And just like that, he realized something he hadn't grasped in years. The child he tried to suppress was no longer dependent on his approval. Over the next few days, the tension in the household grew. My presence alone unsettled them. Family gatherings that once displayed my father's dominance now felt hollow. He attempted to assert control, but every move was anticipated, countered, and rendered ineffective before it could land. I watched quietly, learned quickly, and struck subtly. Every step reinforced one undeniable fact. The power structure they had maintained for decades was collapsing from the inside. By the end of the month, my grandmother said softly, almost smiling, "They think you're playing along, Ethan. Let them continue believing that. The greatest revenge is the one that appears as nothing at all." I understood perfectly. And as I left the estate to return to the city, I glanced at the family home from afar. I felt no anger. I felt no triumph. Only calm, precise certainty. In the days that followed, small incidents began. My father's favorite projects failed unexpectedly. Cousins started questioning his decisions quietly. My mother realized that subtle whispers of truth about me were spreading among the extended family truths she had never anticipated. Every day, my control grew without a single loud confrontation. This was revenge by design, patience, and understanding a slow-burning fire they couldn't see until it was too late. And it had only just begun. By the third month, the subtle shifts I had set in motion were no longer invisible. At first, it was small things. A cousin hesitated before following my father's orders. A neighbor quietly questioned a decision my mother had made without consulting me. A distant relative mentioned my involvement in a family project I hadn't touched in years, but it was being credited to me, slowly eroding their credibility. And then Rachel made her first real mistake. She had always assumed that her charm would shield her, that her favorite child status was untouchable. But the moment she tried to assert herself over a family financial decision, I intervened quietly, without confrontation, without spectacle. A single email, a discreet phone call, information she thought she had hidden perfectly now reached the wrong ears. Her misstep was amplified. Family members began questioning her judgment. One by one, her allies withdrew support, fearing the consequences of backing a reckless decision. Rachel came to me, frustrated, demanding answers. "I don't understand," she said, voice trembling. "Why is everyone turning against me? What did you do?" I met her gaze evenly. Nothing that you didn't already do to yourself. I simply ensured your actions had consequences. Her face went pale. For the first time, the fearless girl who had once been untouchable seemed small. Meanwhile, my parents were crumbling in a way that was quiet but unmistakable. Dinner invitations were ignored. Requests for advice were questioned. Even casual family gatherings became minefields where every word, every decision, every movement was scrutinized by those who had once obeyed them blindly. My father, who had once shouted to assert dominance, now found himself second-guessing every command. My mother, who had relied on charm to maintain control, discovered that her words carried less weight than silence and observation. All the while, I remained calm, neutral, present, but untouchable. One evening, as the family gathered for a rare Sunday lunch, I noticed the shift in full. Conversations I hadn't even intended to influence now circled back to decisions I had quietly guided. Cousins deferred to me without hesitation. Extended family members began seeking my input first. My father's eyes, once sharp and commanding, were dull with disbelief. He leaned over to my mother, whispering something I couldn't hear, but I knew. They were realizing the depth of the shift. The quiet authority I had built had become undeniable. Rachel's downfall continued subtly but relentlessly. Her mistakes, amplified by her own pride, alienated her from allies who once bolstered her confidence. She attempted to rally support through manipulation, but her efforts only revealed more inconsistencies and misjudgments. I didn't need to say a word. Every action, every consequence, every small shift had done the talking for me. Later, my grandmother observed with quiet satisfaction. "You've done more in 3 months than most achieve in years," she said. "The greatest victories are those that appear effortless to others, but are deliberate in reality." I nodded, watching as the family structure, the one that had once suppressed me, crumbled before their eyes. They were still unaware of the full extent, still blind to the careful orchestration behind it, and that ignorance was key. By the end of the month, Rachel finally confronted me privately. Her voice quivered, eyes wide with fear and anger. "You've ruined me," she whispered. I leaned in slightly, voice calm but firm. "No, you ruined yourself. I simply ensured the consequences found you." She realized then that I had been everywhere and nowhere, invisible, untouchable, yet present in every subtle correction, every silent shift of power. For the first time in her life, Rachel understood. Influence and control aren't inherited or demanded, they're earned, and they can be quietly taken away. And my parents? They were watching it happen. Every whisper of doubt, every hesitation, every subtle undermining was a lesson they hadn't taught and couldn't control. By the end of this chapter, the house that once echoed with favoritism, fear, and loud authority had fallen into quiet chaos. My authority, built patiently and deliberately, was the only constant. The lesson was simple. Those who underestimate quiet patience and strategic thinking will always find themselves powerless in the face of calculated resolve. And in that calm, measured dominance, I finally tasted the first true satisfaction of revenge. Weeks passed, and the subtle pressure I had been applying began to manifest openly. Family gatherings, once arenas where my father dictated every decision, became stages for awkward hesitations. Cousins looked to me first, waiting for approval before taking any action. Every question my mother tried to assert was countered politely, effortlessly, by me, leaving her flustered. It was no longer subtle. The cracks in their authority were visible to anyone paying attention. Rachel's missteps reached their peak one evening during a family fundraiser. She attempted to spearhead a project using funds allocated to her by my parents. But thanks to the careful groundwork I had laid quietly redirecting information, exposing gaps, and ensuring scrutiny from key relatives, her decisions were questioned publicly. The room fell silent. Eyes turned from her to my parents, and then they looked at me. My grandmother had warned me about this moment. Let them unravel before the crowd. Do not intervene unless necessary. Watch them learn. Rachel's face drained of color. The confident, golden child act she had perfected crumbled in seconds. Every ally who had once silently supported her now hesitated, Some withdrew their support entirely. My father stepped forward, attempting to rescue her pride, but he stumbled over words, unsure and visibly shaken. My mother tried to mediate, her charm failing under the scrutiny of the extended family. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The room was mine, not by aggression, but by presence. My quiet, deliberate dominance had shifted the balance of power entirely. Later that night, Rachel confronted me privately, tears in her eyes. "You've humiliated me," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" I remained calm. "I'm not humiliating you. I'm letting reality catch up with the choices you've made." Her voice trembled. "And my parents? They see it," I said. "Finally, they understand what they ignored for years. And now, you're learning what it means to be powerless." Meanwhile, my parents faced the first real consequences outside the household. Extended relatives began questioning their decisions. Old allies expressed doubt, and the stories of favoritism and neglect surfaced slowly but surely. The respect they had commanded through intimidation and charm evaporated, replaced by scrutiny and subtle, quiet judgment. My grandmother watched it unfold from the sidelines, her expression unreadable. Later, she said to me, "You've done what most would need years to attempt. You've shown them the cost of ignoring truth and underestimating patience." I nodded. The quiet satisfaction was undeniable. Revenge wasn't loud, but its impact was devastating. Over the next few weeks, Rachel attempted to regain some semblance of control. She reached out to family members, attempted explanations, begged for leniency, but each attempt only exposed further misjudgments and flaws in her plans. Every move she made reinforced the lesson she had been blind to. Influence and authority are not inherited. They are earned and can be quietly revoked. I observed it all. No shouting, no confrontations, no dramatic scenes. Just the calm, inevitable consequence of deliberate patience and strategic planning. By the end of the month, the family dynamics had shifted irreversibly. My parents' authority was diminished in public and private. Rachel's pride had been broken, tempered by lessons she couldn't avoid. And I had solidified my position as the unshakable presence in the family, the one whose influence could no longer be ignored or suppressed. Walking away from that chapter, I realized that revenge had its own subtle art. It didn't need loud proclamations or public humiliation. The quiet, methodical dismantling of power combined with patience and timing was far more satisfying. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. Not because they had been humiliated in the traditional sense, but because the balance had finally been restored. And that restoration was mine to command. The family, once a source of pain, had become a testament to quiet control and deliberate action. And for me, Ethan Miller, clean-shaven and composed, that lesson would last forever. Months had passed since the family's public reckoning. The house that once echoed with favoritism, fear, and false praise was quiet. Subtle shifts I had orchestrated had transformed the dynamics entirely. My parents' authority was diminished, Rachel's pride humbled, and I, Ethan Miller, stood unshaken at the center of it all. But closure demanded more than observation. It demanded a final reckoning. I received a call one evening from my grandmother. She spoke softly, but her voice carried its usual weight. "It's time," she said. "Face them one last time. Not with anger, but with certainty." I understood. This wouldn't be dramatic. There would be no shouting, no public spectacle. Just calm, deliberate confrontation, the kind that leaves no doubt about who has the upper hand. I arrived at the family home late afternoon. My parents were waiting, tentative, unsure of what this meeting would entail. Rachel lingered behind them, eyes wide, pride tempered by fear. I walked in, composed. I let the silence stretch. "You've done damage," my father began, voice tight. "But perhaps it's time to talk." I shook my head. "Talk?" "The talking ended the day you chose convenience over truth." My mother's lips quivered. We want to understand. We want to make things right." I studied them. There is nothing to make right. Actions have consequences. Choices have results. You lived with yours. Now it's time you accept them. Rachel stepped forward, pleading. Ethan, please. I cut her off softly but firmly. I saved you once when it mattered. Not for forgiveness, not for reward, but because your life depended on it. That was the limit of my mercy. She went silent. And in that silence, the truth sank in. My parents shifted uncomfortably. Their authority had been stripped, not by words, not by drama, but by the quiet, deliberate patience of someone they underestimated for too long. I looked at them both. You wanted respect. You wanted control. You assumed fear would ensure it. You were wrong. True respect is earned. True influence cannot be forced. And now, you see it clearly. My father exhaled sharply. You've changed, he admitted. Yes, I replied. I survived the years you tried to erase me. I observed, I waited, and I acted with precision. You will never forget it. For the first time, my mother did not argue. My father did not protest. Rachel did not cry. The room was still. Every word I spoke had landed. Undeniable, irreversible. I stepped back. Calm. Collected. Unshakable. This ends here, I said. Not with forgiveness, not with reconciliation, but with closure. I am not yours to control. I am not yours to manipulate. I am mine. I walked to the door, paused, and glanced back one last time. No anger, no hatred. Just certainty. The house, the family, the legacy, they remained. But I had changed everything. My absence, my quiet dominance, my patient strategy, they were lessons etched into every corner of their lives. I left without another word. Outside, the air was cool, the streets quiet. I inhaled deeply. Revenge had never been loud. It had never required spectacle. It was calm. It was deliberate. It was absolute. And I, Ethan Miller, had finally won.